If you ever find a hand hovering over your light switch in the dark, don't assume it belongs to the living. I remember the night as if the house had decided to breathe for the first time. My name is Ethan. I used to tell people I kept odd hours because I liked the quiet. That was before the quiet started answering back. The apartment is old, thin walls, hollow floors, a door that always complained when you entered. It smells like dust and lemon cleaner, the kind of odor people use to convince themselves a place is cared for. That smell was the last normal thing I noticed that evening. It began with the light. Not the bulb, the small plate by the hallway that glowed faintly when the lamp was on. I had left the living room lamp lit, more from habit than fear. I like shadows to behave predictably. Around midnight, I woke because something felt wrong with the way the light rested against the wall, like a third presence sitting in the corner of the room. I told myself I was tired. I told myself that again when I heard the first sound, a soft, patient scraping from the hallway. Not the shove of a chair or the clatter of plates, something deliberate, like a fingernail testing the grain of wood. I got up slow because hurry makes noise. My feet found cold planks. The lamp threw a cone of warmth across the rug, but the hallway stayed black like a mouth. The scrape happened again, closer, then stopped. Silence folded into the apartment. It was loud enough to be an insult. I held my breath until my chest pinched. That's when I noticed the door ajar, a sliver of darker black yawning between frame and wall. The brass of the doorknob caught the lamp's reflection and made a small, polite glint, as if to say everything was as it should be. Then I saw the hand. It was half in the doorway, fingers curved around the switch plate. At first I thought it was a trick of shadow. Then the skin, if you could call it skin, was the color of bruised flour, tight over long knuckles and stained as if with old rust. The fingers were too thin and too many joints that bent like questions. There was a dried, dark line where the thumb met the nail, like a seam of old red. The hand wasn't moving, merely resting there, patient, as if waiting for me to decide if I would break the agreement of whatever ritual had brought it to my wall. I stood frozen, the lamp buzzing in my ear, every instinct wanting to flip the switch and banish the thing. The other part of me, the part that knows better now, felt a small, ridiculous certainty. If I turned the light off, whatever held that hand would understand it as consent. So I didn't move. Silence stretched. The hand flexed like a promise. It moved, not all at once. It started with the smallest motion, a tendon sliding under pale flesh, a fingertip adjusting its grip on the switch plate as if testing weight. The hairs along my forearms answered with a line of goose flesh. I could hear the blood in my ears like a distant train. The hand didn't flip the switch. It traced the outline of the plate, slow and methodical, as if reading Braille. Each scrape was a sentence, and the silence between them was punctuation. I remember thinking absurdly that I should call someone. I fumbled for my phone, and the screen stayed black as if the device feared waking something that thrived in small sleeping lights. The lamp hummed, an animal at the brink. I told myself to breathe. I told myself to step backward. My feet did neither. The hand flexed and the light dimmed a fraction. Not enough to plunge the room into darkness, but enough to change the shape of every shadow. Edges that had been polite and familiar became hungry. Then the figure spoke. It was not a voice so much as a fold in the air where sound should be, a rasp of breath, a whisper that tasted like cold pennies. It used my name. My house, it said, and the syllables fell like something I had once owned and sold back to the world. The voice had a familiarity that made bile rise in my throat. It knew the exact cadence I used when I lied to myself. It spoke of small things, the scar on my knee from when I was 7, the smell of my father's coat, the song I hummed to fall asleep. It spoke them with a tenderness that stole my equilibrium. How could something behind a wall know the weight of my memory? I stepped forward before I could stop myself, the lamp's light trembling across my hand like a warning. The hallway felt longer now, as if the corridor had been pulled through some unseen geometry. Pictures on the wall, trivial frames of vacations and my sister's laugh, had been rearranged. Where there had been a smiling face, there was an empty, gray oval. And when I blinked, the oval filled with a scene I hadn't lived. A photograph of my living room, years from now, lamp blown out, my couch overturned. The face in the doorway moved into the light. It was close enough that I could see the wetness at the corners of its mouth, the way its eyes caught the lamp like pits of oil. For a dizzy second, the world misregistered and I thought the face was mine. Not a memory of my face, the angle of my jaw, the mole by my ear, but a grotesque, worn version, like a photograph left too long in the sun. It smiled in a way that rearranged my bones. My hand found the switch. It was not mine that moved. It felt like someone else's while pushing through tendon and bone. The plate was warm, almost alive, and beneath my thumbnail, a neat old cut pulsed as if it had been waiting for this pressure to wake. The lamp dipped again, and somewhere deep within the walls something else answered. A faint chorus of scraping, like more hands, testing more switches. The reality I trusted thinned. The city sounds outside grew muffled, as if the building were sliding under a tide. I tried to say something, a defiant laugh, a prayer, anything, and all that came out was a noise I did not recognize. The thing at the doorway reached out a finger and it brushed my wrist. The touch was colder than winter and smelled like iron and old lemons. Wherever it grazed, my skin felt decades older in an instant, as if time were a fabric someone else had tugged. Small red lines bloomed, not from pain but from agreement. I pulled back and the hallway sighed, an elongated exhale that sounded suspiciously like relief. The hand let go of the switch and retreated just enough for me to see past it. The darkness beyond the door was not empty. It was layered with things waiting, not shapes but promises. And then, soft as paper sliding across wood, it said, "Soon." I had never believed in rules for monsters. I believed in locks and logic. That night, I learned there are other kinds of rules, ones written in the ways houses breathe, in the small rituals we never notice. And there was one carved into the inside of my skull now, a command I felt rather than heard. Do not trust the dark when it presses against the light. I thought the only thing left was distance. I thought I could step past a threshold and leave the thing in the frame of the doorway where it belonged, a shadow that belonged to the house and not to me. I learned, with a clarity that felt like being carved, that monsters in rooms where people live do not behave like predators in old books. They behave like tenants who know the lease better than you do. They know which cupboard holds your childhood photographs, which corner your back will press against when you finally stop running. I tried to bolt. My hand slammed the hallway door, the latch biting wood like a jaw. For a blessed second, I believed the barrier would hold. Then the light in the living room, the lamp I thought of as an ally, dimmed and the pull on my chest came, subtle as the tug of a tide. Something in the walls hummed, and with it came a chorus of minute clicks, like dozens of mouths opening in sync. The apartment became a sealed mouth waiting to swallow breath. The air tasted metallic and cold. My nostrils filled with the old lemon cleaner and something beneath it, rot without smell, a memory of something eaten long ago. My ears began to populate with incongruent sounds, a child humming too low, the scrape of a chair across a floor that I knew perfectly. They layered over one another and built a stair I could climb down into. I stumbled, and the world rearranged. I reached for a knife from the kitchen drawer because knives are simple and honest. The blade caught lamplight and threw a thin, sharp reflection across the ceiling. I held it like a promise. The hallway door quivered, and then a soft tapping, like fingernails counting, spaced out a message I could not decode. "Open," the apartment said in a dozen ways. "Open," it said with the weight of all the rooms I had ever avoided. "Open," it said in the voice of my father calling me home. My fingers closed on the knife until the knuckles whited. I pushed the door, because at that point, the choice felt less like courage and more like curiosity about what would happen if I refused to obey the rules I had been given. The doorway gave, and the hand that had waited at the switch was already inside, moving through air like a thing that had always been meant to fit. It was whole now, not just a hand, but shoulders, a ribcage that swallowed the light like a mouth swallowing a coin. It did not run. It unfolded, patient and practiced, as if returning to the shape it most preferred. It reached for me the way someone reaches for a familiar object on a table. There was a look in its eyes that made me want to apologize for every small, selfish thing I had ever done to myself. I remember the exact texture of the cold when it brushed my skin, the press of a stone cooled in a cellar, the slight stick of old varnish, the sensation of being cataloged. My breath hollowed out like something being taken from me, little by little. The knife slipped from my fingers as if gravity had learned new rules. There was a moment, impossibly brief, when I believed I could bargain. I tried names, dates, memories, each offered like currency. The thing accepted none of them. Instead, it cataloged each memory and placed a faint, polite mark where mine used to be. I felt my past shrink into a neat packet and then feel the packet slide from my chest into its waiting palm. My outline fuzzed, my sense of before loosened. I made one last move that was not planned and not brave. I reached for the lamp. The switch met my thumb with a warmth that had nothing to do with electricity. For a heartbeat, I saw all the little, secret rules of the apartment, the ways it balanced light and dark, the bargains it had kept with whoever whispered inside its walls for years. I thought of the hand on the switch the first night, how patient it had been, how perfectly practiced. I could have walked away. I could have let it keep the door and kept whatever of me remained behind a locked frame. Instead, some crooked instinct pulled me toward the simplest thing I had left, a single human act that felt like defiance. I pushed the switch. The lamp flared, then hiccuped. The air folded. For an instant, which felt like forever and like nothing at all, I felt the world rearrange into a shape that had space for me and for that thing together. Then the light went hollow, like a shell, and the house inhaled. Now my voice comes through a recording I left on the kitchen counter, compressed and thin, the edges eaten by something that likes to keep souvenirs. I write this with fingers that do not always obey me, on a device that sometimes plays back memories that are not mine. I do not know if anyone who hears it will understand the rules, or if they will read it like a story told after a party. Maybe someone will think it dramatic and move on. I only know two things, the smell of old lemon cleaner and the feeling of a hand that carries your past like a book. I taught the house my name. It teaches me how to be patient. It kept the light and me.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.